Our next speaker is Matthew Bowen. Matthew has a PhD in Biblical Studies from the Catholic University of America. He currently works as an assistant professor of religious education at BYU Hawaii. He lives there in Hawaii with his wife Suzanne and his 3 kids, Zach, Nathan, and Adele. And he will be speaking about, the title is almost too long for me to get out here, but Where I Will Meet You, the Convergence of Sacred Time and Sacred Space as the Ideological Function of the Tent of Meeting. Okay?
Thank you, David. Dan told me not to break a leg, or told me to break a leg coming up here. I'm going to try not to break a leg or hardware or software or anything else. By the way, David, I should clarify, our middle child, Nathan, he passed away back in 2011, but we do feel like he lives with us, and we've had experiences that have confirmed that he's never very far from us, and that's been a wonderful thing to be reassured of. I want to talk today about the title. I try to get these titles shorter. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes they just don't come out very short. But I want to talk about the Tent of Meeting, Israel's earliest temple, as a convergence of sacred time and sacred space. In fact, I think that the way that it's depicted in Exodus, it gives that as kind of an etiology, and I want to explain what that is. Etiology is a technical term that you'll hear used in biblical studies from time to time. It comes from the Greek word itia, which means a cause or origin, and then of course logia, statements. It's a study of causes or origins. This is not a statement on historicity of the story or anything like that. It's just, it's a statement regarding the nature of what the material is intended to do. Michael H. Floyd puts it this way: etiology refers to stories that tell how something came to be or came to have its definitive characteristics. In Scripture, such stories are typically told about names of persons and places, rites and customs, ethnic identities, and other natural phenomena. Now you'll notice Genesis and Exodus are heavily etiological in nature. You're always getting things explained. Therefore, for this cause, this name is this, or this is why they do certain things. This is why, the Genesis 32, for example, is an iteology about, you got the sinew of the thigh. I want to also talk about how, in this etiological context, how the temple sort of suffuses and is infused in everything. And you've heard a lot about that through this conference with John Thompson's presentation on the biographies of the patriarchs as reflecting temple situations. In Genesis 1 through 2, we've got the entire creation of the world, heaven and earth, described in terms of setting up a tabernacle or the building of a temple. I'll come back to that in a minute. In Exodus. In Genesis 2 and 3, we find ourselves in what our own Don Perry has called the garden temple. The Garden of Eden is a temple situation. From there we move through the fall into the outer court. This is something David's spoken about before. You've got the big altar of sacrifice on the outside of the, remember Adam's cast out of the garden. He builds an altar on the east of Eden. He's going to be baptized there as well, according to the Pearl of Great Price account. You've got in the ancient Israelite temple, you have a bronze sea out there. Genesis 12 through 22, we got Abraham templifying the promised land by building altars. He builds at least 4 of these at Shechem, at Mamre, Hebron, Bethel, and later Moriah, which tradition identified with Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. Genesis 22, at the very end of that, you've got the Akedah told as an etiology for Moriah, or Jehovah Jireh, as the site of the future Jerusalem temple and its sacrifices. Remember the explanation, in the mountain of the Lord it shall be seen or provided. The verb to see there is used as a sacrificial term. When Isaac asks, where's the lamb for the burnt offering, Abraham says, the Lord will see to it, or the Lord will provide. In Genesis 25 through 35, you get Jacob's, well, there's a lot more in here we could say, and this is not meant to be exhaustive by any stretch, but you got Jacob's biography, you got specifically his temple experiences at Bethel, the house of God that John spoke of earlier. You've got the divine embracing or wrestling at Peniel, and you've got all of this is telling us how we get a house of Israel in which kings will rule and reign in later on. Rule and reign in the house of Israel. This is the story of how we get that house or family. As a side note here, the main term for temple is house. That's also the primary term for family. Where do we build our families? As Latter-day Saints, we hope to do it. Ideally, we do it in the house of the Lord. Exodus 1 through 14, we've got Moses. The Egyptian origin of his name suggests the meaning begotten. It's interesting, in a sense, he's begotten and then he's going to help give birth to Israel. The Hebrew interpretation of his name, scholars have pointed to how the name Moses in Hebrew, Moshe, it's pointed in such a way as it connotes the idea, remember, Moses is pulled out of the water. He's going to pull Israel through the water. You got, in the middle of that, you've got Moses at the mountain of God. This, of course, that language echoes Genesis 22, the mount of the Lord. We hear other echoes of that in Isaiah 2, of course. In chapter 17 through 19, Moses is going to diligently seek to sanctify the people to behold the face of God. And he isn't successful at that. When he's ready to bring them there to the mount, you remember the people say, you go, you speak with the Lord. We will hear what you have to say, but we don't want to come any further. So at this point, we're going to get the introduction of the Wilderness Tabernacle into the narrative. Chapter 25 through 30. But note, the Wilderness Tabernacle is set up in how many days? 7. Answering what we see in Genesis 1 and the very early part of 2 with the creation in 7 days. Now I want to talk about, in the Wilderness Tabernacle, you have this distinctive part. You'll see over there, and not only within you've got the outer court there, but the inner sanctuary is described as the Ohel Moed, which would be better, it's usually translated in the King, or always translated in the King James Version, as far as I'm aware, as tabernacle of the congregation. But a better rendering of this might be tent of the meeting, Now this word moed is really interesting. It derives from a verb or verbal root which means to meet. It's connected or derived from, or at least linked to, a Semitic root which means to fix or to appoint a time. Now as a noun, moed could denote very generally it would denote a meeting point. But it described, and you can see this in the distribution of the word as it's used in the Hebrew Bible. Sometimes it refers to space. You have spatial moed, but you also have temporal moed, or time. We meet this word very early on in the Hebrew Bible. Genesis 1:14, God said, "Let there be lights in the firmaments of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons." The word there is moedim. That means for appointed times, or for set times, and for days and years. Now, back to the tabernacle congregation or tent of the meeting. You note that before Moses sets this tabernacle sanctuary that they're going to be carrying with them through the wilderness, he has these two theophanies. One's talked about he actually has several theophanies, but you've got that first one in Exodus 3, and then the book of Moses in the Pearl of Great Price, that gives us another one. It tells us about Moses meeting the Lord on a mountain, which in that case isn't named. You've got Sinai in Exodus 3, and then the unnamed mountain here. What was the purpose of the Ohel Moed? Remember, Moses had been seeking diligently to sanctify the people, that they might behold the face of God. In 2 Chronicles 1:3, it's not just called the Ohel Moed, but it's called the Ohel Moed Ha-Elohim. If you take that as an objective genitive, one way you could render this phrase is the tent of meeting God. It would give us a sort of a purpose or telos for the tent of the meeting. The purpose would be to meet God. In fact, ideologically, I want to show you how this works. You've got a number of passages that, in the description of the establishment and the setting up of the tent of the meeting, that describe the purpose through a series of word plays. I want to explain this. So, the Israelites were to offer a continual burnt offering throughout your generations at the tabernacle, or the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, the Ohel Moed, before the Lord, where I will meet. And this word, the verb meet here, iwaed, the verb ya'ad, it's what they're telling us here is that this is their understanding as to why, in preserving the text this way, they're telling us that this is how they understood this term moed, that it was a place where the Lord would meet them. Not only place, but time. I will meet thee. And there I will meet with the children of Israel, and the tabernacle and the altar shall be sanctified by my glory. We see this over and over, actually. Exodus 30, verse 6. And thou shalt put it at the incense altar before the veil. That is by the ark of the testimony, before the mercy seat, or place of atonement. That is over the testimony, where I will meet thee. The tabernacle or temple had to be sanctified in order for the people, in order for the priests and then everyone else in Israel to be able to partake of that same holiness. Exodus 30, verse 36, talking about instructions regarding incense in the temple. And thou shalt beat some of the incense very small, and put of it before the testimony, in the tabernacle of the congregation, Ohel Moed, where I will meet. Iwaed, and you could also, some witnesses render this, reveal myself, or make myself known to you. It shall be unto you most holy. Interesting note here, incense connected in temple practice with prayer. Psalm 141:2, let my prayer be set forth before thee as incense and the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice. David, you'll probably catch in some of the gesture cues here. Remember Revelation 8:3-4. And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. As Latter-day Saints, if you've been through the temple, this should catch your attention here. And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. The same language occurs again when they're given instructions regarding putting the witnesses of things that had happened during the Exodus. You've got the jar of manna, what John later calls the hidden manna. You've got the tablets of the law, and you've got the Aaron's rod in there, where they were supposed to lay them up, that is literally rest them in the tabernacle of the congregation, or the tent of the meeting, before the testimony, where I will meet with you. This one's interesting, and you'll note the picture I chose to accompany this one. Thou shalt put the mercy seat above the ark, and in the ark thou shalt put the testimony that I shall give thee, and there I will meet with thee, and I will commune with thee from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubims which are upon the ark of the testimony. All of these things which I will give thee into commandment unto the children of Israel. Some of you will remember in Exodus 24 where when Moses and the children of or 70 of the elders of the children of Israel, where they see the Lord fully, describes a paved work under his feet. The prophet Joseph Smith, when we get in section 110 of the Doctrine and Covenants, he describes something very similar. And it appears that the kaporet, or the atonement lid, or atonement cover for the Ark of the Covenant, was intended to represent that on some level, what the Lord was standing on. All of this, remember, we don't get the rituals of the temple with any clarity really until, or in their fullness, until we get to Leviticus. Here it's mentioned too, Leviticus 9, 4, and 5. Why are they doing all of this? Well, it states here that the Lord will appear unto you. And they brought that which Moses commanded before the tabernacle of the congregation. Fast forward to the time of Solomon's temple. Up till this time, they've been still using the portable sanctuary. Now we have at this point, the historian tells us that the ark is, and together with the tabernacle, they're all brought to the temple, where the congregation of Israel was assembled. Then you're going to get a manifest. The Lord's going to, of course, accept the sacrifice that's offered up upon the altar. John Lundquist years ago pointed out that the Jerusalem temple, the architecture of the Jerusalem temple was the architectural embodiment and ritual enlargement of the Sinai experience for Israel. So, but then what happens to the temple? Eventually with the Babylonians, 586, 587, we get the temple destroyed. Israel goes into, the northern kingdom had already gone into captivity. At this point, Judah also goes into captivity. I'll come back to that in just a minute, but how does Abraham figure into this? We talked about how Genesis and Exodus are ideological. Now, no, remember when the Lord had made promises to Sarah, or to Abraham and to Sarah. It's interesting that this word moed, as appointed time, comes up in this account. Remember verse 10 of chapter 18, Sarah's told, or Abraham and Sarah told, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. That's the spring. And lo, Sarah, thy wife, shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door, which was behind him. Is anything, and then a few verses later, is anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed, and the word there is moed. We've got a convergence of sacred time, sacred space. I will return unto thee according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. One chapter earlier, but my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee. At this set time is moed in the next year. Now, it's interesting that part of what the book of Abraham expands our knowledge and understanding of is the idea of set times or appointed times. In fact, the vision of the book of Abraham is much more expansive on this. The Lord said unto me, now Abraham, these two facts exist. Behold, thine eyes see it. It is given unto thee to know the times of reckoning and the set time, yea, the set time of the earth upon which thou standest, and the set time of the greater light which is set to rule the day, and the set time of the lesser light which is set to rule the night. Remember John Thompson's presentation this morning. This comes in the context Abraham is being prepared to go into Egypt to be able to stand in the court of the Pharaoh and talk about these things. I think the idea is the Lord's preparing him so that he goes on one of the most important stages in the world at that time, and he doesn't sound like an idiot. That he can, in fact, not only sound coherent and articulate, but that he can say some things that perhaps have the Egyptians, who were very good astronomers for their time, they haven't perhaps thought about in the same sense. He's going to use this as a marvelous way of setting up the analogy. Stars differ from each other in light and glory, even as the intelligences, the premortal spirits differ from each other in intelligence. All right, so note how this connects with Genesis 1:14. God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, seasons, and for years. I'm going to come back to the temple in just a minute, but remember in 3rd Nephi, chapter 1, some students of the Book of Mormon wonder, they think it's strange. There's a day that's set apart by the unbelievers they're going to execute the faithful if the signs that Samuel the Lamanite that he prophesied, if they don't come to pass. And then it happens that is the appointed time for the Lord to be born into the world. I'd suggest to you that this is what Mormon isn't giving us the background on. What's probably happening here is this is actually already a festival time that we're dealing with. that the unbelievers have picked a festival time, an appointed time, on the sacred calendar for this to be the point at which this has to happen. Well, so you got the faithful. They did watch steadfastly for that day and night, and that day which should be as one day as if there were no night, that they might know that their faith had not been in vain. And it came to pass, so there was a day set apart by the unbelievers that all those who believed in those traditions should be put to death, except the sign should come to pass which had been given by Samuel the prophet. And lo and behold, now it came to pass, when Nephi, the son of Nephi, saw this wickedness of his heart, he was exceedingly sorrowful, and it came to pass that he went out and bowed himself upon the earth, and cried mightily unto his God in behalf of his people, yea, those who were about to be destroyed because of their faith in the tradition of their fathers. It came to pass that he cried mightily unto the Lord all that day, and behold, the voice of the Lord came unto him, saying, Lift up your head and be of good cheer, for behold, the time is at hand, and on this night shall the sign be given. Remember, why do we have lights in the heavens according to Genesis? For seasons, appointed times. Lift up your head and be of good cheer, for behold, the time is at hand, and on this night shall the sign be given, and on the morrow come I into the world, to show unto the world that I will fulfill all which I have caused to be spoken by the mouth of my holy prophets. So you've got the fulfillment of, I better boat race this then. Okay, here we go. Get ready. All right, so appointed times. We talked about that the tabernacle of the congregation, the function was to prepare the people to meet God. They were to prepare the temple, and that temple in the wilderness was prepared to prepare them to meet God. I think Alan has tapped into some of this when he talks over and over about being prepared to meet God. Alma 5:28. This life is a probationary state, a time to prepare to meet God, a time to prepare for that endless state which has been spoken of by us, which is after the resurrection of the dead. Behold, this life is the time for men to prepare to meet God. Behold, this is the day of life. The day of this life is the day for men to perform their labors. By the way, I'll skip past this. I want to talk about, in fact, it's Alma, by the way, that we should see this. Moses is told to him and Aaron, or no, not him and Aaron, him and Joshua are told to go to present themselves in the tabernacle of the congregation, in the Ohel Moed. Moses is told at this point, the days of your death, where you're to die, are drawing nigh. We understand through the New Testament and from this passage, which talks about Alma's death, we understand what happened to Moses. He was buried by the hand of the Lord, or in other words, he was taken up or received. I love this artwork, by the way. You can find this, I think, down at the temple in St. George.
It's a Thanksgiving.
Is it Thanksgiving point now? All right, I wasn't aware.
Full snatch of it.
Yeah. But this idea of meeting the Lord, Alma actually seems to have had that experience, according to this passage in Alma 45. It's also Alma who talks about death and resurrection as appointed times. There's an appointed time that all shall come forth from the dead. And when this time cometh, no one knows, but God knoweth the time which is appointed. Over and over he talks about death and resurrection being an appointed time. That this is a fixed or set time that the Lord knows. We don't know that, or don't know when those times are, but according to his sacred calendar for each of us, those are points on that calendar. Now, back to the temple that was destroyed in Jerusalem, 586, 587. We've got the theme of the temple and its destruction and rebuilding. This happens more than once, or we have it destroyed more than once. But the idea is that the prophecies are that there will one day again be a temple in Jerusalem. Psalm 102 speaks to this. Thou shalt arise and have mercy on Zion, for the time to favor her, yea, the set time, that's the moed, is come, the appointed time. What's interesting, Jeff Marsh and some others have pointed this out, and this isn't an idea original to me, but you have Moroni appearing to Joseph Smith at the time of the autumn equinox, or the transition point from summer to autumn, where you have night and day basically equal time in the northern hemisphere. Well, that coincides with the autumn festival complex in ancient Israelite religion. On September the 21st, 22nd, I understand, coincided with, I believe, the Feast of the Tabernacles that year. When Joseph finally received the plates 4 years later, remember, he comes to the same spot, same appointed time every year. I think at the last year, it coincided with Rosh Hashanah, or the start of the new year that year, if my memory is serving me right on that. Doctrine and Covenants 110, Kirtland Temple. We have the Theophany on April 3rd. Set time has come. Leg's still intact too. This happens on Passover of that year, according to the calendar in 1836. You have this. Why is this important, this set time? This is where we get all the priesthood ordinances or priesthood keys and rights for doing everything that we do in the temple in terms of the ordinances for sealing and families and so forth. But we also have destroyed temples of our own, or temples that have been ruined. And you've noticed that some have pointed out the connection here is a beautiful metaphor for resurrection in these rebuilt temples. You remember Truman Madsen in his obituary, his family says that some of you will remember where you were when President Hinckley announced the rebuilding of the Namu Temple. Truman Madsen says, he exclaimed, "Oh, Joseph." Ezekiel 37 talks about the gathering, that is the resurrection of Israel, collective, in terms of, or he talks about the gathering and resurrection of Israel in terms of the resurrection of the body. It's interesting to me that Psalm 102 is quoted in the Revelation on the Namu Temple in Doctrine and Covenants 124, verse 6. For behold, I am about to call upon them to give heed to the light and glory of Zion, for the set time has come to favor her. Moses 7 also speaks to this, and I'll be really brief here. We're supposed to be looking forth for the time, there he says, the time of my coming. For there shall be my tabernacle, and shall be called Zion, New Jerusalem. And the Lord said unto Enoch, then shalt thou and all thy city meet them there. And we will receive them into our bosoms, and they shall see us, and we will fall upon their necks, and they shall fall upon our necks, and we will kiss each other. There's the divine embrace, the meeting point. The parable of the 10 virgins, there's this word, there's two words, hypontesis and apontesis, this idea that we go out to meet the Lord. It's a word that describes meeting. It's this is sacred time converging with sacred space. Conclusion, for behold, this is the time for men to prepare to meet God. Yea, behold, the day of this life is the day for men to perform the labors. I want to testify to you that I know that the temple prepares us. How is the Lord preparing us to meet the Lord? It's the temple. All of it is schooling us. All of it is preparing us for that meeting, whether it happens when he comes or whether it happens, probably in most of our cases, when we go there to meet him. But I testify to you that we're being prepared. The temple is the school to prepare us for that. Thank you.